In 1955, a 25-year-old Clint Eastwood sat in a small office at Universal Studios listening to a director named Arthur Lubin tell him that he had no future in acting. "You'll never make it," Lubin said, not cruelly, but with the certainty of someone who'd been in the business long enough to spot talent and its absence. "Your Adam's apple is too prominent. You move like you're uncomfortable in your own body. And frankly, you have the same expression whether you're supposed to be happy or terrified." What happened in that office and what happened 37 years later when those two men met again at the Academy Awards became one of Hollywood's most quietly satisfying stories about judgment, persistence, and the danger of telling someone what they can't do. Clint had come to Hollywood in 1954 after being discharged from the Army. He'd done some logging work in Oregon, tried community college, and decided acting might be a way to make a living that didn't destroy his back by age 40. He had no training, no connections, no family in the business, just a face that sometimes got him noticed and a willingness to show up to auditions. Universal Studios had a contract player system in the 1950s. They'd sign young actors to short-term contracts, put them through classes, give them bit parts in films, and see if anything clicked. Most didn't. The studio would let them go after 6 months and bring in the next batch of hopefuls. Clint was part of that system. $40 a week, acting classes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Small roles, if you were lucky, usually just standing in the background or delivering one line. Arthur Lubin was directing a film called Lady Godiva starring Maureen O'Hara. It was a period piece, medieval setting, lots of extras needed. Clint got cast as a young Saxon who had exactly one line: "The Lady Godiva approaches my lord." It should have been simple. Stand in frame, deliver line, move on. Clint rehearsed it a dozen times. "The Lady Godiva approaches my lord." Different inflections, different emphasis. He wanted to get it right. The day of shooting came. Lubin called for the scene. Clint stepped into frame, opened his mouth, and froze. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough that there was a pause before he spoke, a hesitation that killed the natural flow of the moment. "Cut," Lubin said. Again, they ran it again. Same hesitation, same uncomfortable pause. Cut. Again, 5 takes. On the 6th, Clint got through the line smoothly, but Lubin had already made up his mind about what he was seeing. After filming wrapped that day, Lubin called Clint into his office. "Sit down," Lubin said. He wasn't angry. He seemed almost sympathetic, like a doctor about to deliver bad news to a patient. "You seem like a nice kid," Lubin began. "Hard worker. You show up on time. You're polite. But I'm going to be honest with you because someone needs to be." Clint nodded, not sure where this was going, but sensing it wasn't good. "You don't have what it takes to make it as an actor. Your physicality is wrong. You move stiffly, like you're always aware of the camera. Your Adam's apple is too prominent, and it's distracting when you talk, and you have almost no emotional range. You look the same delivering that line, whether you were supposed to be worried, excited, or terrified." Clint sat very still, processing this. "I've been directing for 15 years, Lubin continued. "I've seen hundreds of young actors come through this studio. Most of them don't make it, and that's just reality. The ones who do have something, you can see immediately: charisma, natural timing, the ability to disappear into a character. You don't have that." He paused, then delivered the line that would echo for decades. "You'll never make it in this business. Not as a leading man, probably not even as a character actor. My advice, find something else to do while you're still young enough to start over. The meeting lasted maybe 10 minutes. Lubin wasn't being cruel. He genuinely believed he was doing Clint a favor by being honest, rather than letting him waste years chasing an impossible dream. Clint walked out of that office, crossed the Universal lot, got in his beat-up car, and drove home to the cheap apartment he shared with another struggling actor. He didn't tell anyone about the conversation for 3 days. When he finally mentioned it to his roommate, his voice was calm. Lubin says, "I'll never make it." Says, "I should quit." "Are you going to?" Clint was quiet for a long moment. Then, "No." "Why not?" "Because he might be wrong." That simple. No dramatic declaration, no angry vow to prove Lubin wrong. Just a quiet decision that one man's judgment, however, experienced, didn't have to be the final word on his future. Universal dropped Clint's contract in 1955, 6 months after signing him. They'd given him bit parts in 6 films, none memorable. His one line in Lady Godiva ended up on the cutting room floor. For the next 3 years, Clint scraped by doing odd jobs and taking any acting work he could find. He dug swimming pools. He worked as a lumberjack in Oregon during the off-season. He appeared in B-movies that played in drive-in theaters and disappeared. In 1958, he got his break, though it didn't seem like one at the time. CBS offered him the role of Rowdy Yates in a Western TV series called Rawhide. It was steady work, decent money, but television was considered the minor leagues. If you couldn't make it in films, you did TV. Rawhide ran for 8 years. Clint appeared in 217 episodes. He learned his craft by doing it hundreds of times. He learned about camera angles, about economy of movement, about the difference between stage acting and screen acting, and slowly he developed the exact opposite of what Arthur Lubin had criticized. His stillness became powerful instead of stiff. His minimal expressions became iconic instead of limited. His physical presence became commanding instead of awkward. In 1964, while still on Rawhide, Clint flew to Italy to make a low-budget Western for $15,000. The script was called A Fistful of Dollars. The director was Sergio Leone. Nobody expected much from it. The film became a phenomenon. Clint's performance, quiet, economical, dangerous, created a new type of Western hero. The squinting stare, the stubbled face, the poncho, all of it built on the very qualities Lubin had identified as weaknesses. 2 more Leone films followed. For a few dollars more, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. By 1967, Clint was an international star. He returned to Hollywood and started making American films. Hang 'em High, Coogan's Bluff, Where Eagles Dare, each one successful, each one building his reputation. In 1971, Clint directed his first film, Play Misty for Me, while also starring in it. The studio was nervous about giving an actor directorial control, but Clint brought it in under budget and on schedule. Then came Dirty Harry in 1971, the film that made him a megastar, the role that defined him for a generation. By the mid-1970s, Clint was one of the biggest box office draws in the world, but he was still primarily known as an action star, a tough guy who squinted and shot people. In 1992, everything changed. Clint directed and starred in Unforgiven, a Western that deconstructed everything Westerns had traditionally celebrated. Violence had consequences. Heroes were complicated. Justice was ambiguous. The film premiered in September 1992 to overwhelming critical acclaim. It was immediately recognized as something special, a masterpiece from a director who'd been making solid films for 20 years, but had never quite reached this level. The Academy Awards ceremony was held on the 29th of March, 1993, at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles. Unforgiven came into the night with 9 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Clint. Arthur Lubin was there. He was 89 years old, retired from directing for over a decade, but still active in the Academy and occasionally invited to major ceremonies. He'd had a successful career, directed Abbott and Costello films, created the Francis the Talking Mule series, worked steadily in television, but he'd never won an Oscar, never even been nominated. Clint didn't know Lubin was in the audience. They hadn't spoken since 1955, 37 years earlier. Clint barely remembered the man's name, but Lubin remembered Clint. He'd watched Clint's career from a distance over the decades, watched him become a star in those Italian westerns, watched him transition to Hollywood success, watched him become a director. And with each success, Lubin had felt a growing sense of unease about that 1,955 conversation. The Best Director category was announced. The nominees were shown on screen. When they got to Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven, the camera cut to him sitting in the audience, that same economical expression, waiting. And the Oscar goes to Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven. The pavilion erupted in applause. Clint stood, embraced his partner, Frances Fisher, and walked to the stage with that same unhurried, commanding presence that Lubin had once called stiff and uncomfortable. Clint's acceptance speech was characteristically brief. He thanked the cast and crew, acknowledged his fellow nominees, and said something simple about how making Unforgiven had been a privilege. Then he walked backstage with his Oscar. Later in the ceremony, Unforgiven won Best Picture. Clint returned to the stage now as producer to accept that award as well. 2 Oscars, Best Director and Best Picture, for a man who'd been told in 1955 that he'd never make it. After the ceremony, there was the traditional Governor's Ball, where winners, nominees, and Academy members mingled. Clint was surrounded by congratulations, by fellow actors and directors paying respect. And then, through the crowd, Arthur Lubin approached. Clint didn't recognize him. Why would he? 37 years, thousands of people met in between. Mr. Eastwood, Lubin said, his elderly voice still carrying that director's authority, I don't expect you to remember me. My name is Arthur Lubin. I directed you in a small role in 1955. Clint's expression didn't change. I remember the film, Lady Godiva. Yes. I wonder if I might speak with you for a moment. They stepped slightly away from the crowd to a quieter corner of the ballroom. I need to tell you something. Lubin said, in 1955, after we filmed your scene, I called you into my office. I told you that you would never make it as an actor. I told you to quit and find another profession. Now, Clint remembered the office, the conversation, the certainty in Lubin's voice. I remember that, Clint said quietly. I was wrong, Lubin said simply. Completely, utterly wrong. I've thought about that conversation many times over the years as I watched your career. I want you to know that I'm sorry. And I want you to know that watching you win tonight was one of the most humbling experiences of my life. There was a moment of silence between them. The ballroom noise continued around them, but in that small space, it was just 2 men confronting a judgment made 37 years earlier. You gave me your honest opinion, Clint said finally. Based on what you saw at the time, that's all anyone can do. My honest opinion was wrong. Maybe I needed to hear it to figure out if I really wanted this. Lubin looked at him with genuine curiosity. Did it make you want to quit? For about an hour. Then I decided you might be wrong. Turned out you were. There was no anger in Clint's voice, no triumph, just statement of fact. If I may ask, Lubin said, what made you keep going after I told you to quit? Clint thought about that. I figured you were making a judgment based on what you'd seen in thousands of actors, but you'd only seen me for a few minutes, doing one line, nervous as hell. That didn't seem like enough information to decide my whole future. That's remarkably wise for a 5-year-old. I wasn't that wise at 25, but I was stubborn enough to want to find out for myself. They talked for a few more minutes. Lubin asked about Unforgiven, about Clint's approach to directing, about how it felt to win. Before they parted, Lubin said one more thing. I'm 89 years old. I've had a good career, made films I'm proud of. But I'll be remembered more for being wrong about you than for anything I actually did. And strangely, I'm fine with that. Why? Clint asked. Because it's a better lesson. Experienced director makes successful films isn't much of a story. Experienced director completely misjudges young actor who goes on to win 2 Oscars. That's a story worth remembering. Clint smiled slightly. Teaches people not to give up when someone says they can't do something. Exactly. So thank you for proving me wrong. The world's better for it. They shook hands. Lubin went back to his table. Clint returned to the congratulations and celebrations. They never spoke again. Lubin passed away in 2005 at age 101. In his later years, he would occasionally tell the story of the young actor he'd told to quit, always making himself the cautionary tale, always emphasizing that judgment is fallible. Here's what that 1,955 conversation in Arthur Lubin's office teaches us. One person's assessment of your potential, no matter how experienced, how certain, how well-intentioned, is still just one person's opinion based on limited information. Lubin saw Clint nervous and stiff in a one-line role and concluded he lacked talent. He didn't see the next 8 years of hard work. He didn't see the quiet development of a unique screen presence. He didn't see the stubborn determination to figure it out. And Clint, to his credit, didn't let one man's judgment become his own internal voice. He heard, "You'll never make it," and thought, maybe, but I'll find out for myself. That's not blind optimism. That's not refusing to hear criticism. That's understanding the difference between one data point and a conclusion. The world is full of Arthur Lubins, people who will tell you with absolute certainty what you can and can't do. Sometimes they're right. Often they're not. The only way to know is to test it yourself. Clint Eastwood won 4 Academy Awards in his career. Best Director and Best Picture for Unforgiven in 1993. Best Director and Best Picture for $1 Million Baby in 2005. He directed over 40 films. He acted in over 70. He created some of cinema's most iconic characters. And it all happened because a 5-year-old kid heard "You'll never make it" and decided that one director's certainty wasn't enough reason to quit. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who's been told they can't do something. Sometimes the best response to "you'll never make it" is proving that judgment wrong, not out of spite, but out of stubborn curiosity about what's actually possible.